Hi everyone, I'm Greg, the creator of Dork. Welcome to our tips and tricks video helping you to make airbrushing our paints quick and easy. A side note, we also have a sister video to this one that covers hand brushing our paints. So if you're a hand brusher, click on over to that video. Anyways, on to the tips. The first big tip is to look at the side of the bottle for an undercoat color recommendation. I know, no one ever reads the directions, but trust me, this info is worth it. Our paints work a little differently than most, and the final look of the paint will depend a lot on your choice of base coat. Our single color metallics work kind of like you would expect them to, i.e. if you want metallic red, you put down a red base coat and then you use red rum over it, that sort of thing. However, turbo shifts will usually require a black base coat to look like they do in the bottle. Say, take for example, a paint like blue raspberry will look white in the bottle and then will appear colorful when put over black. There are exceptions to prove the rule, like Mother Lode, which needs to be put over white, and well, the 7 Zenny shift colors, which can go over white or black, but you get what I mean. Now that you've painted the right base coat color, it's time to shake or stir our paint back up. Metallic pigment can be quite heavy and likes to fall out of suspension. The bottle already comes with a mixing ball inside, so shaking by hand is quite easy, but using a vortex mixer is better. That having been said, my new favorite preferred method is to pop the nozzle off the bottle and get in there with one of our new silicone mixing sticks and mix it all back up, so shameless plug. So what type of airbrush should you use? Well, we recommend any standard non-detail oriented airbrush with the 0.5 needle nozzle combo. Something like the Badger Patriot 105 we use at the office. However, if the airbrush only has a 0.3, it'll work just fine. You'll probably need to thin your paints a little bit more, and it might just take a little bit longer to build up your layers. No matter what size needle nozzle you use, I recommend turning up the airbrush to 30 psi. I found that to be the sweet spot as you need a little more air power to get the bigger pigment particles moving. Finally, we can put some paint on our airbrush. You really only need as much as you think you'll use for this first coat or session. And whether hand or airbrushing, I do always like to thin my paints a little bit. We have our own thinning medium on the way, but until then, other thin hobby acrylic mediums will work just as well. Just don't use anything that says it's a thinner and not a medium. Thinners usually have alcohol in them, which is great for removing our paints from surfaces, not so much for thinning them. If you have a 0.5 needle nozzle combo, I recommend starting with a ratio of maybe 4 parts Dork paint to 1 part medium. If you have a 0.3 combo, try 3 parts paint to 1 part medium. This can vary a lot depending on your airbrush, so please experiment with what ratio works best for your personal setup. Okay, we can finally get to spraying. I recommend making this first coat pretty light. I like calling this a stick coat, and we're mainly just trying to get a little bit of paint all over your model, but not enough to fully gloss out the surface, and especially not enough to start pooling in any details. Let this first coat dry for like maybe 10 to 15 minutes. You don't want this layer to be super wet when you apply the second and third layers over it. Otherwise you might screw up what you just did. You can totally let the mini air dry for that time, or use a small hair dryer or a fan, that kind of thing. But if you have a dual action airbrush, you can use the airbrush itself to dry the model. I usually just hold the trigger down and spray air in the mini for about a minute while spinning it around. Now that we have the first coat down, repeat the steps above to apply the second and or third coats. If you want the same level of saturation as we show in the bottle swatch, I definitely recommend doing those other coats. As we already have that first stick layer down, you can go a lot heavier on these subsequent layers, but make sure not to let the paint pool. That means you went too heavy. Metallic pigment will want to settle in the recesses like a wash, which is why we do multiple thin coats and let them dry before putting more paint on. Layering like that lets you get more even coverage over the high and low spots. One last thing, I recommend waiting overnight before you play with your mini or varnish it, just to make sure the paint has fully dried and cured. Yeah, that's about it. That's how to dork out a mini. I know, that was kind of long, but thank you for making it this far. We're going to be filming and putting a ton of new content online soon, so please like and subscribe to be notified when we post updates. My name's Greg, thanks for watching and happy painting.